Is it just me, or did it feel like January lasted 3 months long? Hey guys, my name is Mackenzie and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my January reading wrap up, the first reading wrap up of the year. Take a second and be proud of yourself because we just made it through the first month of 2024, month 1 out of 12. January was an insane month for me. I read 15 books. That's the most books I've ever read in 1 month. Now, if you watched my January TBR video, I'm gonna be real honest with you guys and say, I did not stick to my TBR at all this month. Just pause this video right now and guess how many books I read from my January TBR. Go ahead, pause it, and just guess. If you guess 2 books, then you are correct. I'm just so bad at sticking to a TBR. I am such a mood reader. Even though I didn't stick to my January TBR this month, I still ended up reading a bunch of amazing books. So let's get into the 15 books I read in January. Before we jump into the books I read, let's talk about my January stats. I have my laptop here and I'm going to go over the statistics of the books I read in January because, you know, I'm just a numbers girly. So like I said, I read 15 books this month. Out of the 15, only 2 were physical books, which means I read 13 books on my Kindle. When I say that I'm in my Kindle era, I'm not lying. This is literally my entire life and, as you can see, my entire personality. My Kindle was my best purchase of 2023. And don't get me wrong, I love physical books, but I just read so much faster on my Kindle. Let me know if you guys want to see a video where I talk all about my Kindle Rex, and all of my Kindle accessories. I know you guys have a lot of questions about Kindles, and I feel like that video would definitely be beneficial to most of you. So let me know if you guys want to see that. Back to the stats. Out of the 15 books I read, 2 were fantasies, 1 was thriller, 1 was a literary fiction, and 11 were romances, which is insane because last year I barely read any romances. I was definitely in my fantasy era last year, so it's crazy to me that the first month of this year I was just reading a lot of romances. Out of the 15 books that I read, 6 of them were ARCs. If you don't know, an ARC is an advanced reader copy that publishers will give out to readers before the book is released. And the reason that they do that is to help promote the books and to get readers excited for the books before they come out. I highly recommend checking out the website NetGalley for ARCs. That's where I got all of my ARCs from this month. You do have to get approved before you read the books, but once you receive approval and you read the books, you just have to post an honest review. I post all of my reviews on Goodreads, so definitely make sure that you follow me on there if you want to hear any of my full thoughts on the ARCs I read this month. And lastly, out of the 15 books I read, 6 of them were novellas. Those were my January stats. So now let's get into the books that I read. So the first book I read this month is called 12th Night. This is by Alex Fullmouth. I hope I'm saying that right. But if you don't know, this author is actually Olivia Blake. Olivia Blake is her pseudonym, which I think is so cool. I believe she writes some YA books under her full name, but under her pseudonym, Olivia Blake, she's written The Atlas Six, Masters of Death, Alone with You in the Ether, like so many books, and she's one of my favorite authors. This is the first ARC that I received this month, and this book comes out on June 6th. This is a YA romantic comedy, and this follows 2 high schoolers. One is Viola, she is a video gamer, and then Jack, who is the star football player of the high school. Jack, the football player, he gets injured, and so he's kind of bored and he needs something to fill up his time. So he turns to this video game called 12th Night. Viola is one of the best players of this video game, and she actually plays under a male character because females are disrespected in the gaming industry. Viola and Jack despise each other in real life, but in this game, 12th Night, they form a unique friendship and bond. And what Jack doesn't know is that Viola is actually playing as a male character. So this whole time he thinks he's playing with another dude. And outside of the game, they actually start falling for each other. I ended up rating this 3.5 stars. I thought it was so cute and the perfect YA romance. I think the concept of this book was really unique. I loved the football player and video gamer dynamic. I really liked that the author kept mentioning that females can be just as great as men, even better when it comes to video games. My only complaint of this book is that I did not like the female main character, Viola. I just found her to be a little annoying at times, and she's definitely one of those characters who just hates everyone and hates the world. I still enjoyed this book. It was a fun read, and I definitely recommend it if you love video games. The second book I read in January was The Night Circus. This is a fantasy book about a circus that arrives without warning. This was one of the books on my January TBR that I actually read this month, and I'm really happy that I did. The Night Circus is the perfect cozy fantasy book to read during the winter. It is so magical, and the descriptions are just beautiful. It felt like I was at the circus with the characters. There's also a competition that goes on in this book, and the magicians don't know who each other are. There is some romance. I would say the romance though is more of like a subplot. It definitely is more fantasy and magic focused, so just be aware of that before going into this book. It is a bit more of a slow burn, but I still really enjoyed it, and I just think the descriptions of this are just beautiful. Like, I just can't stop thinking about this book, and I gave this one 4 stars. I guess I was just in like a circus mood this month, because then I decided to read Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I was so excited to read this book, and guys, it breaks my heart because I did not like this. And if you don't know, I'm a huge Stephanie Garber fan. I loved Once Upon a Broken Heart, that series. As you can see, I have it right here, and I also have multiple copies of that book because I loved it so much. And one of the main reasons why I was so excited to read Caraval is because of how much I liked the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So I was like, okay, let me go back, because I know that you're supposed to read this series first, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna read it now because of how much I liked those books. I think one of the main reasons why I didn't like this one is because I felt like the magic was lacking. The magic is definitely more prominent, is that the word? Or more focused, more shown, more described? I don't know. But the magic is definitely, I think, more apparent. There we go. More apparent in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Now, don't get me wrong, there are definitely some magical moments in this book. I think I was just expecting more. I also just really didn't like the characters. I couldn't connect with them, and I found them to be very annoying at times. Caraval follows 2 sisters, Scarlett and Tella, and they live on this island, and they get invited to Caraval. Caraval is basically a competition that takes place once a year. It's on a different island from where they live, and there's a competition that happens, and whoever wins this competition will be granted 1 wish. The 2 sisters have been dreaming about going to Caraval, but when they finally get there, the one sister, Tella, ends up being kidnapped by Caraval's mastermind, Legend. So then the other sister, Scarlett, has to participate in this competition in order to win and to find her sister. Caraval gets compared a lot to the Night Circus and also to the Hunger Games because of the competition that takes place in this book. And I'm just like, girl, how? Because I did not see the similarities. I think the only thing that these books have in common is that there is a circus. For me, the game in this book was a bit boring, and there really wasn't any competition. I also felt like the romance was very random. I actually think I would have preferred this book more if the romance was just completely taken out. My biggest issue with this book is that nothing was real. The author would say one thing, and then a couple pages later, she would take it back and be like, oh, actually, no, that didn't happen. So for me, it just felt like I wasted my time reading this book. I wanted to love this so badly. I ended up giving it 3 stars. And guys, 3 stars is not a bad rating. I just thought it was an okay book. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue the series or not. I really want to get to Jack's book because Jax is one of my favorite characters in the Once Upon a Broken Hearts trilogy, so I definitely want to read more of his story. But let me know in the comments down below whether or not I should continue the series and if it gets better. The 4th book that I read this month was called This Summer Will Be Different. This is by Carly Fortune. It is another ARC I received, and this one comes out on May 7th. And guys, this was just the perfect summer book. Carly is the author of Mamie at the Lake and Every Summer After, and I know that a lot of people have mixed thoughts about those books because of a certain trope that is in those books. And if you know exactly what trope I am talking about. But I'm happy to let you guys know that that trope that is in those 2 books is not in this book. Anyway, this takes place on Prince Edward Island, and it follows Lucy, who is vacationing there during the summer, and she ends up hooking up with one of the locals there named Felix. And guess what? Felix is her best friend's brother. And she had no idea because she never met her best friend's brother before, and also her best friend gave her a list of rules and was like, rule number 3, do not fall in love with my brother. So if you love the best friend brother trope, this book is definitely for you. It is told in alternating timelines between the past and present summers. There is so much tension and secret moments and also stolen glances between the 2 main characters in this book. It's also a bit steamy, and it just screams Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift. The lyric, I don't want to keep secrets just to keep you, definitely describes this book and the main characters. I ended up giving this book 3.75 stars. I definitely enjoyed it a lot more than Carly's last book, Mamie at the Lake. This one was just a fun read, and I'm definitely excited for summer now. The 5th book that I read in January was another ARC I received. This one comes out on March 25th, and the book is called Swift and Saddled. This is the 2nd book in the Rebel Blue series. The 1st book is Done and Dusted. And guys, I am shocked by how much I enjoyed this book This is a cowboy romance. I don't really read a lot of cowboy romances, but I definitely think after reading this, I'm gonna have to start getting into my cowboy romance era because I loved this book. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than the first book, Done and Dusted, and I gave this one 4 stars. The second book follows the brother Wes Ryder and the female love interest named Ada. It's also a bit of a workplace romance because Ada is an interior designer and she goes to Wyoming to work on a project for this ranch. Her first night in Wyoming, she goes to a bar and ends up making out with one of the locals. What she doesn't realize is that the man she just made out with is her boss, Wes Ryder, who is the owner of the ranch that she's about to be working on. I really enjoyed this one. I just adored the characters and the small town setting. When Taylor Swift said, "In a world of boys, he's a gentleman," she was talking about Wes Ryder. Like, he's just the perfect man, and what I love so much about him is that he's just so nice. Like, I sometimes get tired of the grumpy, mean male characters. Like, sometimes you just need a good guy, you know? And prepare to be sick of me because I'm going to be continuing to talk about Taylor Swift and relating her lyrics to the books I read in January. I mean, just like look at my sweatshirt. I'm wearing my 1989 sweatshirt. So of course I'm going to be mentioning Taylor Swift any second I get. But anyway, I think a lot of people are going to like this one and I can't wait for it to come out so you guys can read it. The 6th book that I read this month was called A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. Once again, another ARC that I received. This one comes out on June 25th. And guys, this was my favorite book of the month and my favorite read of the year so far. This was just the perfect romance book. I was giggling and kicking my feet the entire time. It just felt like a warm hug. Ashley Poston is the author of The Dead Romantics and The 7-Year Slip, and I can definitely say that this book was my favorite so far. I just adore her writing, and a lot of the romances that she writes also includes elements of magic realism, and this one was no different. This follows Eileen, who is a professor of literature, and she's just a book girly. She is part of a smutty book club, so you know, we already love her. Each year, the book club goes to New York for 1 week to get together and talk about books, but this year, everyone bows on Eileen, and this is the one thing that she looks forward to every year. So she's like, you know what, I'm just gonna go by myself. While she's driving, she gets stuck in a thunderstorm and has to pull over in this small town. But this isn't just any small town because she ends up being stuck in the small town of her favorite romance book. Just picture your favorite book and imagine being stuck in that world. So Eileen is basically stuck in this small town and she ends up running into the hot, grumpy bookstore owner. And Anders is the perfect morally gray, grumpy character. Like, I just love him so much. I would die for him. Like, I would die for this fictional character. That's how much I like him. This book is definitely for the book lovers. It is just so whimsical and just a fun read. Eileen is one of the most relatable female characters that I've ever read. And if your favorite song is Right Where You Left Me by Taylor Swift, then you need to read this book because this one is for you. Of course, this was an automatic 5-star read for me. It might even be a 6-star read, and I can't wait for you guys to read this one. I can't believe that I received an ARC of this next book. Like, I'm still in shock and so thankful, but I read Funny Story by the queen herself, Emily Henry. This comes out April 23rd, so mark your calendars. I'm literally going to cry just thinking about this book. Like, I still can't believe that I was able to get my hands on Emily Henry's new release. And this honestly might be my new favorite Emily Henry book. This follows Daphne, who is roommates with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex-boyfriend. Wow, that is a mouthful to say. This book has forced proximity, roommates to friends to lovers, a little bit of fake dating, and also a lot of family drama, and it's just perfect. Emily Henry is the only person that can convince me to move to Michigan. I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that reading this book felt like watching an episode of New Girl. Daphne and Miles just reminded me so much of Nick and Jess. Dare I say that Miles might be the best book boyfriend Emily Henry has created so far. Like, he is just perfect. He is everything. I will say that Funny Story is a bit more lighthearted than other Emily Henry books, but it still includes heavy topics that will make you cry, and this one is also a bit more spicy. Another 5-star read, and once again I'm going to mention Taylor Swift, but this book is definitely for the Archer girlies. Moving along, the 8th book that I read this month was called If Cats Disappeared from the World. This is a Japanese literary fiction, and if you own a cat or if you're a cat lover, please read this book. This follows a young man who finds out that he has cancer and doesn't have much longer to live. He is in shock and he goes home and decides to make a list of things that he wants to do before he dies. While the young man is making this list, the devil appears and makes a deal with him. The devil says to the man, "I will let you live longer in exchange for giving up an item and making it disappear from the world." So the young man agrees to this deal because he wants to live longer. So the devil ends up taking away phones, clocks, and movies from the world. The young man starts to realize how different the world is without these items. Finally, the devil's like, you know what, I'm going to make cats disappear from the world. And the man is like, nope, I won't let you do it. I won't spoil the ending, but this is definitely a book that will make you think. It is so heartwarming. It feels like a warm hug, and I was definitely crying by the end of this book. I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I really enjoyed this. The 9th book that I read in January was The Teacher by Freda McFadden. This was the final arc that I received this month, and this one I believe comes out on February 6th, so it will probably be out by the time I upload this video. If you don't know, Freda McFadden is basically like the Colleen Hoover of thriller books. This is another thriller, and I ended up finishing this book in one day. Although this was addicting and fast-paced, I ended up only giving this book 3.5 stars because I found the characters to be very unlikable, and the storyline made me feel a bit uncomfortable. I can't say much without giving away any spoilers, but this follows 2 teachers and a student. For me, I feel like Freda McFadden books are either a hit or miss, and this one was somewhere in the middle. And this one I thought was just okay, definitely a little bit weird and not my favorite read of the month. And finally, the last 6 books that I read this month were all part of the Meet Cute series, which are a bunch of romance novellas. They're so short, you can read them in one day. You can also listen to these books on audiobook. I think I listened to 3 out of the 6 on audiobook, and the other 3 I read on Kindle. I won't go into the storylines of these books just because they are so short, but I will say there are definitely some that I enjoyed a lot more than others. The first one is The Expectation to the Rule, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was my favorite book of the series. Next was Worst Wingman. This is by Abby Jimenez. I love her. She's like one of my favorite authors, and I ended up giving this one, I think, 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I just wish it was longer, and this was my second favorite book of the series. The third one was called Rosie and the Dream Book. This was my least favorite of the series, and I ended up giving this one 2 stars. The next one was called Drop, Cover, and Hold. This one I thought was just okay, and I ended up giving this 3 stars. The 5th book was called With Any Luck. This is by Ashley Poston, and you already know I love her. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. And finally, the last book in the series is called Royal Valentine, and I also gave this one 3 stars. So if you are going to read any of these books from the Meet Cute series, I highly recommend either reading the first one or the second book. I think those are definitely the best in the series. Wow, so that brings us to the end of this video. I'm out of breath from talking so much, but those were the 15 books that I read in January. Huge thank you to Nick Gelly for these arcs. I can't wait for these books to be released so you guys can read them. If you made it this far in the video, be sure to leave a comment down below letting me know your favorite read from January. I think my favorite books of the month were A Funny Story by Emily Henry and A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. I can't wait for February. I have a bunch of fun videos planned, so make sure you give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos. As always, you can find me on BookTok and Bookstagram. Also check out my Goodreads if you want to see full reviews of the books that I read in January. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!